to questions and probing on the facts. India has relied on disinformation throughout this conflict. Even during the war, the Indian media played the role of fake news and amplified some of this disinformation that originated from the Indian government.
Sure. It's Ellen McMyer with the Associated Press. Thank you for doing that. The fact that the conflict is between two nuclear-armed countries.
No, Pakistan was not asked anything to do with nuclear questions, full stop, let alone no first use during this conflict. Pakistan did not have to rely on its nuclear arsenal or the threat of its use of its nuclear arsenal to establish military dominance during this conflict. As far as future obligations or future commitments, I think the important first step is to build on this ceasefire, work towards a comprehensive dialogue where we can address any and all issues in an environment of peace outside of these hostilities where our neighbor is threatening to cut off our water supply. They call the ceasefire a pause, not a ceasefire. They call the ceasefire a trailer and expect us to wait for the movie. Their prime minister is giving speeches where he says, I have a message for the youth of Pakistan, eat bread or eat my bullet. I think in that environment, perhaps that's not the most conducive to take revisions of our come up with revisions of our policy. However, I believe if we start moving towards peace, then there will be lots of steps that both sides could take to ensure that our neighborhood is a safer place.
So here in the U.S., I would say there's a perception that the historical relationship between Pakistan and the United States is slowly withering away, that the United States is now trying to transition to a close relationship with India, and in turn, China is coming and taking Yusuf's place in Pakistan, and then that's adding a whole new dynamic. So as a delegation that came here to strengthen the relationship between Pakistan and the United States, how would you respond to that characterization?
Look, as far as vacuums being created, there's no doubt that once the U.S. started to pay less attention to Pakistan, that creates a vacuum. Nature detests a vacuum, and other people take that space. I do believe that the United States is reconsidering its historic approach, or its approach in and around the fall of Kabul. We're talking investment, we're talking minerals, we're talking crypto, we're talking tech, we're talking agriculture. So that's moving in a positive direction. I will say that India has pitched itself as a net security provider for the region, and American taxpayer dollars go into subsidizing the Indian economy and the Indian military-industrial complex in exchange for it supposedly providing this net security provider role. I believe this 5 days of conflict has exposed India. It is not a net security provider. It is a source for insecurity in South Asia, and as a result, insecurity in the region and the globe. They brought the threshold for military armed conflict between Pakistan incredibly low. They launched a war on the basis of a lie, and then they couldn't even win that war, and the US had to intervene and ask and facilitate a ceasefire. I believe the real net security provider, or the foundations for a real net security provider in South Asia, would be for peace to be established between India and Pakistan. That would provide the stability in the region that is so desperately required. If we're going to be in the zone where anywhere in India there's a terrorist attack, and that leads to a military conflict that could potentially lead to a nuclear conflict that could potentially draw in regional powers, global powers, other countries, that's an incredibly unstable situation. The trade talks that the US is having with India, the trade talks that the US is having to Pakistan, while there may be sort of big, beautiful trade deals in the pipeline, if we don't manage to come back to a semblance of stability, that'll be counterproductive for all of us.
I was curious about something. There's been so much talk for so long about the threat of Islamist militancy. What do you think about Hindu extremism? And do you think that that is an issue that the West, the United States in particular, needs to pay more attention to?
I don't associate terrorism with any religion, with any culture, with any country. I believe terrorism has no borders, has no religions, and must be condemned across the board. It is politically convenient for terrorists. Sometimes they use the mask of one religion or another religion. Sometimes they use the mask of nationalism or separatism or something else. At the end of the day, we all need to take a uniform policy against non-state actors and terrorists. As far as extremism is as a topic, it's absolutely a bone of contention. It's a concern for us. We deal with extremisms of all forms, shapes, and sizes within Pakistan. Extremism in India is a new reality. And unfortunately, that Hindutva extremism that we're witnessing in India, that you can trace back to, however far back you want to. I often start with the Gujarat riots, but that's not actually sort of the source of this extremism. It's absolutely evident across Indian society. The word terrorism is used as a wolf whistle to demonize minorities, to demonize the Muslims in India, to demonize the Muslims in occupied Kashmir, and to demonize the Muslims in their neighborhood. I don't think that particularly, serves the purpose for the people of India. We've witnessed saffron terror in the past. Terrorist attacks that have taken place in India, from the Samjhauta Express to the Gujarat riots and so on, have never gone punished. In fact, it was Modi himself and his government who forgave the gang rapists from the Gujarat riots. The people who were charged in the Samjhauta stress attacks were set free. So it's clearly a problem for the Indian government to also deal with. What's even more concerning is that the source of this Hindutva extremism is the RSS. And the RSS is a branch of the political party that's in power in India, the BJP. So it's within that context that the decisions in India are being taken. It's within that context that their foreign policy decisions are being taken. And I think that is a challenge for all of us. But regardless of all of this, our effort is to convince everyone that instead of finger pointing, instead of blaming one another and sort of getting caught in these vicious cycles, we need to get to a point where we're working together to combat terrorism. And as I said earlier, if India has any complaints, we want to address them, and we have a long list of complaints that we'd like India to address.
Trade, that's something the President himself brought up. There was a delegation last week. Is that something that has come up in your meeting with lawmakers and others, and what's sort of been somewhat of that? And then secondly, on water and sort of India's threats to that, what do you see as a solution? What can you get for lawmakers here in the United States and the United Nations, and what's been their response to that?
Sure, thank you. As far as trade is concerned, that was the conversation we were having before this crisis. It's a conversation we look forward to having now as well. The Commerce Secretary of Pakistan will be leading a delegation here to the United States to talk trade with his counterparts. We're pretty optimistic about that. I think that sort of the way that these tariff decisions have been playing out for different countries have different contexts. For Pakistan, it's given us an opportunity because Pakistan and the United States don't spend that much time talking about trade. We talk about terror, we talk about Afghanistan, we talk about other things. That's what we've spent the last couple of decades of this relationship obsessing about. I think Mr. Trump's decision vis-a-vis these tariffs have forced us to have a comprehensive discussion about trade, and there's a lot of potential that I believe we can unlock as a result of that conversation. As far as water, as far as the Indus Water Treaty, everyone we have met, obviously at the United Nations, but even here in Washington, D.C., we're all unanimous in condemning this decision. Everybody is expressing to various degrees how they don't want this precedent to be set. I'm sure in their conversations with the Indian government and their representatives, this issue will be raised. I don't think that this is a position that the Indian government is going to be able to sustain for very long. It is not the moral high ground, it is the lowest of the low ground to try and maintain this position that you're going to cut off Pakistan's water. I do hope that the international community, above and beyond geopolitics or any kind of partisan politics, will speak in one voice in condemning this decision.
Just wanted to follow on the Indus Water Treaty. In your meetings with your American counterparts, did you give them a request? Did you request them to help you negotiate with India to help you solve this problem? This is first. And secondly, you did talk about your earlier presentation that India has not been.
So as far as the water issue is concerned, and as far as discussions with the United States is concerned, we haven't asked for mediation on any of our issues. We have asked the United States to talk to India as a friend and convince them that we need to sit down and have a comprehensive dialogue encompassing all our issues. The United States representatives that we have met, be it at the United Nations or here at the State Department, obviously expressed concern about this decision and their desire to see this decision taken back. As far as the damage that Pakistan took, we did not lose a single jet in this conflict. We took down 6 Indian planes, but we had 20 Indian planes in our lot at the night of the initial attack. Because our armed forces showed restraint, they only targeted those planes that emptied their load on Pakistan and hit our civilian infrastructure and our civilians on that first night. As far as the damage as a result of the drones that fell within Pakistani territory, the missiles that were fired in Pakistan, the Pakistani government and the Pakistani armed forces have released a comprehensive report on that with pictures, with information, with everything. I'm happy to ask someone to share that with you.
Thank you. In the current super news, to the Energy Minister for the economy, where is there scope for cooperation with Pakistan?
So I think the largest investment in Pakistan in the way of critical minerals is by North America. It is a Canadian company which is invested in Pakistan, and the financial closure is coming with the support of European Exim Banks and the US Exim Banks. It's all in process, but I think if you're thinking about the electrification revolution, you know that there can't be any electrification revolution without any copper. And if you're thinking about going green, then you know that there can't be any green if there are no batteries, and there can't be any batteries if there's no lithium and some bunch of other critical minerals and metals. And Pakistan is very rich. Pakistan is open for business. We have a large number of North American companies that are coming to Pakistan. They're most welcome. And as I mentioned earlier, even as the energy minister previously, we've had some discussions about green hydrogen and green ammonia as well, but obviously that requires a large bunch of subsidy. So those were ongoing conversations, but this conversation about critical minerals and critical metals is real, it's happening. And as I mentioned earlier, the largest investor in Pakistan in the area of mining and critical minerals is North America.
If you could share a little bit more about the tangibles with your meetings with the US officials here, it does seem as though there's a sense of market opportunity at this time as opposed to during the Biden era when it felt like Pakistan was somewhat shut out.
As far as the Biden administration is concerned, at the tail end, I was foreign minister of Pakistan, and I certainly didn't feel shut out from the Biden administration. I believe Pakistan made important progress during those days. Obviously, there was a different context. This crisis has afforded another opportunity for us to talk peace, particularly given the role that the United States President has played. We're definitely leaning in on that. As far as Pakistan being on this list, I think given the progress that Pakistan has made by and large combating terror, the cooperation we have in the CT domain with the United States. I mean, if you recall, when the US President made his first speech, the second time round he became president, the joint sessions of Congress, there was one country that he thanked for their cooperation on CT, and it was Pakistan. So I think whatever metric they were using, and FATF, we went through a long, arduous process along with the United States and other countries. Again, when I was foreign minister, this process concluded, and Pakistan went from being on the grey list to on the white list. So I think whatever metric they're using to make these decisions.
A quick follow-up, was it not part of the discussions with the Americans?
No conversation on Imran Khan at state or any government level.
I would, if I may, I would simply like to add that I think President Trump is not getting celebrated enough for the role that he's played in establishing peace. I think he should be recognized. I think he's played a critical role. I think what we call the ladder of escalation between two nuclear states is not a ladder. One wrong step, it won't be a ladder of escalation. It could be an abyss. And I think there was a great intervention that the US President did. And I think he's not getting recognized enough for that. And he should be, both internationally as well as in the United States. He's playing the same role in terms of Russia and Ukraine. He's playing similar role in trying to settle the crisis, the humanitarian crisis and the war crisis between Israel and Palestine.
Hi, my name is Musla and I'm with Fox News Channel. I just wanted to ask a question about Afghanistan and threats emanating from there. Did that come up in any of your conversations with the US?
Okay, thank you. That's a very good question. I think you've really hit the nail on the head. So far, a lot of the discussions, even a lot of the issues that India brings up and everything, are revolving around the consequences of post-Afghan 1. And all the terrorist groups, whether they're the Taliban, whether they're Al-Qaeda, whether they're LEJ, whether they're LAT, all one way and the other are the sort of baggage from that original crisis. And we're still facing the consequences of that war. The way in which the pullout took place in Afghanistan, the manner in which that weapons are left behind in Afghanistan is certainly posing a problem for us today. And I'm worried that the actual problem is what's going to happen with the baggage that we've left behind from Afghan 2. Today, it's affecting Pakistan. With the number of terrorist attacks in Pakistan today are more than any time in our history. The radical groups within my country have been empowered, been emboldened by what they see as a victory for the similar mindset within Afghanistan and are challenging the writ of the state in Pakistan. They're attacking our citizens, they're attacking our armed forces, they're attacking our policemen, and we're witnessing these terrorist attacks every single day. What's even more concerning is groups that operate in and out of there or sort of benefiting from the vacuum that's been created in Afghanistan post the fall of Kabul are now cooperating across the ideological spectrum. So disparate groups that have no ideological linkages, they don't have the same goal, the same targeted, they've even operated in the past but not cooperated. Now, because of the freer environment they're experiencing, they are coordinating. And we're seeing groups like the BLA in Balochistan coordinating with the TTP, who have no ideological connection amongst themselves. And what I'm worried about is if these groups can coordinate together, then the other groups, such as Daesh, such as ETIM, that are also operating in and out of there, they also might start cooperating together. And while today Pakistan is facing the brunt of this, tomorrow someone else will, which is why we're even more concerned that India is politicizing the issue of terrorism for their own, whatever the purpose is. Because when you politicize the issue of terrorism, it undermines the actual fight against terrorists. I think we need more cooperation, regional, international, on what are we going to do now that post-Kabul to deal with the remnants, with the terrorism that's left over. As far as the weapons are concerned, you'll be astonished to hear sometimes when we're fighting these terrorist groups within Pakistani territory, the weapons that they have procured through the black market that were left behind in Afghanistan are more advanced than the policemen that they're fighting against. They have night vision capability. I just learned this today, that they have night vision capability that's like fourth generation night vision capability that the Americans had in Afghanistan, that they didn't even sell to Israel. It was that advanced, this technology. And now this technology has found itself in the hands of extremists. So Pakistan is facing the blowback of that today. What I'm really concerned about is, heaven forbid in the future, somebody in and out of Afghanistan crosses into Pakistan or doesn't even cross into Pakistan, but goes on to conduct terrorist attacks in a third country, which is why we're calling for dialogue, comprehensive dialogue that includes terrorism, so we can cooperate in the region, but also seeking to cooperate internationally. We have the counter-terrorism dialogue coming up between Pakistan and the United States, and I think it will be very beneficial in the context of your question.
Add something to this. One major U.S. newspaper traced the weapons used in 12 March train hijacking and terrorism. Those weapons used by terrorists were captured by Pakistan's forces. And the US newspaper traced these weapons back to their American manufacturer. And so the weapons that the United States left in Afghanistan are very clearly being used to perpetrate terror in Afghanistan.
Sir.
John Hassan for the Turkish Federal Agency. You spoke about the fake news during this escalation. And one of the stories that got attention was the Turkish military support in Pakistan, and claims that Turkish planes brought ammunition or some weaponry to Pakistan. So we know there is a cooperation between Pakistan and Turkey in the defense industry and defense field. What can you tell us about the Turkish role during this 5 days of escalation?
First, we're obviously very grateful for our relationship with the people of Turkey, with the government of Turkey. As far as our defense procurement is concerned, we procured a lot of our defense equipment also from Turkey. I don't know if I'm allowed to go into specifics, but I can say that we procured equipment from Turkey, and we used that equipment during the conflict. I think this was the first conflict where the opposing side didn't only take issue with Pakistan, but also took issue with anybody who made our planes, or anybody who made our drones, or anybody who made our who facilitated us in that sense. And I think that's a bit strange. There was a lot of disinformation that emanated out of this, but we're incredibly grateful for the role that the Turkish government, the Turkish leadership, the moral support that the Turkish leadership and the Turkish people gave us during this difficult time.
Madam, was there a Turkish effort during the escalation as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. There was many friendly countries reached out not only to us, also to India, to try and ensure that the issues didn't escalate and we could work towards a ceasefire.
Yes, I have an alternate one thing the Indian delegation has been telling the media here is that they're not interested in any talks with Pakistan, because the Pakistani civilian leadership does not really hold any real power, and it's the military that.
Thank you. First of all, that's not what they're saying. They're saying no to everything. When the terrorist attack first took place, the Pakistani government, the Pakistani Prime Minister said, let there be an international impartial investigation into the terrorist attack. They said no. Donald Trump says, let there be mediation between India and Pakistan. They say no. We say let there be dialogue between Pakistan and India. They say no. They haven't said whether the dialogue, they haven't pointed out to us that if the dialogue is with the civilians or military, they've just said no across the board to dialogue with Pakistan. The military leadership and the political leadership are all on the same page within the Pakistani context. We're united against terrorism, and we believe it is in the interest of our region to establish peace with India. It is India who's been running away from calls for an investigation, and it's been India who's been running away from efforts for dialogue. I believe that is perhaps the latest excuse for not having a dialogue right now. If they'd like to talk to our generals, I can arrange it. If they'd like to talk to our politicians, I can arrange it. That shouldn't be a problem.
It's quite ironic because the only communication that is taking place is with the army. Isn't it ironic? What a question. Think about it. The only communication that is taking place right now is between DGMOs. So military is talking to military, and here they come to Washington, D.C. and say, we are not going to talk to you because we don't want to talk to the military, my friends. Military is the only agent that you're talking to.
But only in the context of the ceasefire. Above and beyond the ceasefire,
there's no communication.
No communication either with the military or with the civilians. But on the ceasefire front, or the de-escalation front, the point of contact was DGM.
For Indian delegation in Washington, they kept the narrative of
I mean, I just think that the Indian delegation is getting increasingly desperate. If that's a narrative that they'd like to pitch, so be it. But that was not the basis of this conflict. Supposedly the basis of this conflict was terrorism. Terrorism that took place in Kashmir. They've cut off our water supply. All of these things have nothing to do with China. They might think that, I think that this sort of image that they've been trying to, this image about themselves that they've been pitching here in the United States, that we're going to be the net security provider, that subsidize our economy, subsidize our military-industrial complex for some future war within the region, has actually been exposed and backfired during this conflict. That a country that's supposed to be the net security provider for the region could not provide net security to their own people, could not provide net security to the occupied people in Kashmir, could not provide net security to their airplanes. So I believe the true path forward is for India and Pakistan to engage in a dialogue, to establish peace. Whatever excuse you want to make, sometimes it's this civil military excuse, sometimes it's this geopolitical excuse, sometimes it's this, oh, all Muslims are terrorist excuse, so we're not going to talk to Pakistan. It's getting, I mean, you can't be two nuclear armed neighbors with a conflict threshold so low and absolutely no dispute resolution mechanism. They don't accept the United Nations, they don't accept international law, they don't accept United Nations Security Council resolutions, they don't want mediation from the United States, and they don't want to talk directly with Pakistan. So would it make rational sense to any country anywhere that to have no dispute mechanism, no way to resolve your dispute other than to go immediately to war? I think that entire proposition makes India less secure, makes Pakistan less secure, makes the whole region less secure, and it's in all our interests to convince India to undo the decision that doesn't serve their purposes and come to the table and talk peace.
May I add one thing? So this Chinese question is very interesting. I feel that it's quite. I mean, it's interesting because the second largest importer of Russian crude is India. What does that make India? And the shield that they have put, that they call S-400, is a Russian shield. It's Russian equipment. What does that make India? And the drones that they used were Israeli. So what does that make India? And the planes that they flew were French. So what does that make India? Isn't it crazy that we use some equipment because our axis to arms is limited. We'd like to diversify our armament, our arsenal. We reach out to the world to diversify our arsenal. And if we don't get anything from anywhere, we get the best equipment that we can. But no one says that this is a Russian bloc because of S-400 or because of the import of troops. No one says it's the Israeli bloc. No one says it's the French bloc. Look, this is between India and Pakistan. We have equipment that we buy from all over the world. That doesn't define any bloc.
Good evening, to Mr. Bhutto, a question you mentioned that you had just learned today about the night vision goggles.
No, I knew about the night vision goggles. I knew that night vision was a threat to us, and I didn't understand how they had this visibility. What I just learned today, that this technology was so advanced and so guarded by the United States that they didn't even sell these fourth generation night vision equipment to their ally Israel, but they left it behind in Afghanistan, and it's now being deployed by terrorists.
Thank you. I was going to ask you, who told you that? And how did you learn that? Are you sharing that do you consider this a threat now, based on...
The night vision was always a threat. The weaponry left behind in Afghanistan was always a threat. All old news. The only new news for me, I learned from my ambassador while we were discussing this today, that equipment, the specific night vision equipment, was so advanced, this fourth generation night vision equipment was so advanced that America didn't even share it with their closest allies. It was only in their own army's use. They left it behind in Afghanistan, and as a result, it is now in the hands of the Taliban. I don't know who else they're selling it to, where else it would have reached. And that's one example. There's obviously lots of other weaponry and other things that we now have to face in battle. Maybe the ambassador can share more details.
Well, Mr. Anwari Khan from Dawn News. Yeah.
बिलावल भुट्टो जरदारी की सरबराही में पाकिस्तान के सिफारती वफ्द के अरकान की प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस आपने मुलाहिजा की। आप जियो न्यूज़ के साथ रहिए।
हुकूमत पंजाब की जानिब से अहले पंजाब को ईद की खुशियाँ मुबारक। वज़ीर आला पंजाब मरियम नवाज शरीफ के सुथरा पंजाब विजन के मुताबिक ईद उल अजहा के मौके पर गुज़िश्ता साल की रिवायात को बरकरार रखते हुए हुकूमत पंजाब की जानिब से सफाई